for those of you who are in Busan at the ITU Plenipotentiary, and good morning for our friends from the United States and Latin America. Welcome from the Geneva Internet Platform, where we are going to host today's webinar on evidence and measurement in Internet governance in the preparation for Geneva Internet Conference, which will be held on the 18th and 19th of November here in the same building. We have a lovely weather in Geneva, the Indian summer, the last, I guess, sunny days before the winter starts, and it sets and creates a nice atmosphere for discussion with two distinguished guests that we have today. On my right-hand side is Professor Lichia who is the Director of Center for Socio-Economic Development based here in Geneva. And Lichia is involved in the development studies, in particular on reporting and evidence-based and measurement of the Millennium Development and, inshallah, future sustainable development goals. On the left-hand side, I'm particularly pleased to introduce Michael Kende. Michael is the Chief Economist of the Information of the Internet Society, and he has been doing a lot of research on the impact of Internet on the modern economy. And Michael will give us his reflections on available evidence in this field. We have some problems with technology. Okay, fixed. Good. We will start, and the third panelist who unfortunately couldn't join us today is Dr. Ed Gelbstein. Ed prepared the presentation and background paper, which I suggest that you download from our website, which is named Cybersecurity. What we may not know, we don't know, famous Rumsfeld's play with the words, an overview of cybersecurity challenges. And I will say a few words on the question of evidence and measurement in the field of cybercrime and cybersecurity after we hear the introductory remarks from Lichia and Michael. Lichia, please. Okay. And they will display that.
Thank you very much, Jovan, for inviting me to this webinar, a very important topic. So what I would like to do is go directly, since I'm no Internet governance specialist, I'm going to go directly into the topic, why we should link the Internet governance discussion with the coming SDG implementation. And I think this is really a planetary project, and really is huge, and nobody really has sort of a full grasp of what the situation. So let me just sort of go ahead with it. At the moment, we have already, has a lot of development, and that's including a data revolution report just came out in October, and I think it will be worthwhile to look at. So at this junction, I think it's important to consider what we should. Should we move to the next slide? Yes, please. To talk about how can we build up on the experience learned from the past 14 years about implementing the Millennium Development Goal, and how can we take it further and achieve the target by 2030. And I think what we at this moment what we need is good governance to make it work. The next one, please. And I wanted to sort of go back to starting point, looking at what is the proposal at this stage. Next one, please. And at this moment, we have 3 specific goals within the zero draft proposed to the General Assembly, and this is already being it's going through discussion and will be decided by September 2015.
If I may just give the context for our colleagues from Internet governance community, which is referring to the negotiation of the post-millennium goals that should start after 2015, which somebody calls sustainable development goals.
Yes.
And Lichia is involved in the process of the negotiation of those goals. Therefore, we will have the direct insight of what's going on and how is it relevant for IG. Please,
well, thanks, Jovan, for clarification. And I think that the negotiation and deliberation has already started. So all countries such as Switzerland has been very, very active, engaged in the whole discussion about the sort of financial aspect of the future development and the necessary investment, as well as how do we monitor progress, how do we assess progress. And here this is the link with the discussion about data and measures. So let me sort of go back to some sort of legal framework. And of course, using the word legal at this moment is a little bit loose, but I think, if we look at the zero draft, the proposal put at the table for the international community to discuss, has already highlighted 3 points. If you look at the focus, the goal 17.15, it is talking about availability of data. And if you think of the world, it's not really a level playing field. This is a very important issue to be considered. Many countries actually have no data, and they have to go to centralized points to ask for data. And I think that would not help a bottom-up approach to implement sustainable development goals. The second one, 17.16, and I think it is also very important. It is highlighting the voluntary monitoring and reporting. However, if we are indeed considered that the global system is one ship and everybody's action is going to impact everybody else, a voluntary reporting might not be sufficient, but it's a starting point. Next point, 17.17, and it suggests that broader system need to be introduced so that national accounting would be much more comprehensive, and that would be very important. And I think this is where we need to address what is the situation in terms of data collection, analysis, storing, and retrieval. So that a lot of work needs to be done, and we need to have mapping. The SDG compared to the Millennium Development Goal has made substantive and significant improvement. Can I have the next page? The next, please. The significant innovation. And here is that the first time we have clearly laid out a framework for accountability. How would this be done? Of course, needs to be further elaborated, but accountability cannot be measured and implemented and scrutinized if we have no data. And so it requires a global leadership. We have to start thinking about representation, transparency, effectiveness, articulation of the implementation of these global goals in 17 focus areas in the context of each individual country. For us at CSAN, our consideration and main concern is really about feedback loop. How can we learn from all this effort that we can continue to build up innovation capacity to find solutions to problems yet to emerge? Next question. So I think there are a few questions central to the formulating the accountability framework. I already said that. I think these 5 questions are very important, and I think this is common. It's the ownership, is how to collect, where to collect, and who is going to be responsible, and finally, what will be the resources to this. Our proposal, next one, please. Our proposal is straightforward. We do not consider our proposal at this moment about a different monitoring methodology is a replacement of existing ones, but complementary to many initiatives. At this moment, the Secretary General, I already mentioned, has formed an independent expert group to look at data revolution. Initiatives coming from OECD and other places is all about the new statistics. But what is vital is not just about new statistics, is to address the question, what kind of information and data? And also the necessity to think about governance. Next point. I looked up on the working group for the international governance, and I think this definition is excellent and it's universally applicable. It's not specific just for internet governance. So I took that as a safe starting point. Essentially, the legitimacy, next one please, the legitimacy of any governance system is built on the democratic legitimacy. It's not just about data, but it's rather is about who does the representation, the representativeness of the data that's being collected. It's the accountability. It's the transparency of this data. It's so that it's traceable. It's analyzable. Sorry for maybe there's no such English word. And also effectiveness. Effectiveness oftentimes is narrow definition looking at performance, but here I think it's more important to talk about justice and fairness. And lastly, it's participation of deliberation. And so data and measures need to provide actionable intelligence, meaning people can use this data to make decisions, to take actions, and to make a difference. The second thing I think is also very important, oftentimes when we talk about global monitoring and reporting and evaluation, it is we miss system intelligence. System intelligence basically is to say how we do things, what are the sort of the hypotheses or premise that we made, and why it didn't work, and which is more about sort of if we use the terms probably more in line with the quality management system thinking. But it's a process to impact, how we do things and why we didn't have the impact we want. That's where the learning, global learning, need to come in, and that this is essential from our point of view, why we need to collect data. So the key challenges, next one please, is really about policy coherence. Today when we talk about sustainable development, we're actually speaking that simultaneously, concurrently, or somehow synchronized way that we need to have development in the social sphere, development in the economic sphere, and development in the environmental sphere. Without a synchronized interaction, we would not be able to solve the issues that we face today, which is, you know all about it. So I don't need to elaborate. And so I think we also need toolbox. The next one, please. So an integrated platform for SDG governance is essential to make the sustainable development goals are actually coming together rather than following the vertical tradition. And here we have we say data, we need to connect the dots. And connecting the dots, I think this is where challenge will come in, because we're talking about vertical, global, regional, national, subnational, and horizontal. And it is, next one please, it's an emerging field, right? And it's ongoing. There are many new innovative, creative way of using internet and mobile technology to support the collection of data to analyze the situation in crisis situation, like in Haiti, in Kenya, for instance, and people using mobile technology for banking. These are all emerging new practices, but we have not been able to see how these three branches of development coming together. And what is the total matrix look like? We don't know. So let me conclude. I think the necessary, next one is the necessary condition is really good internet governance, because internet has been shaping and forming the new world, right? And the governance of internet to make it is indeed, it is a support for the future, for the inclusive growth and inclusive development is essential. And the second, I think, for a user, from a user point of view, the ensured accessibility and coverage. We should not leave communities behind. Right? It's not a question of personal owning access to internet, but it's available. And I think the third point in terms of the condition is citizen engagement and stakeholder consultation. So the last one, I conclude. Internet governance for implementing sustainable development goals. I think the work just begun.
Thank you. Thank you, Lichia, for this very interesting bridge between sustainable development discussion, which takes a lot of energy of diplomatic and policy communities worldwide, and internet governance, because we tend in internet governance community to be in the silos, like all policy communities. And it's very healthy to hear what is discussed in the sustainable development community, in particular a few aspects that you raised: importance for data, for monitoring and sustainable goals, importance of the internet overall for the implementation of sustainable development goals. And I think there are quite a few concrete ideas, including reporting and monitoring, which is a big headache for many countries worldwide, especially small and developing countries, to report to so many parallel processes. A lot of food for thought. I'm sure there will be questions. We have, I can see some colleagues, Cristina Monti from European Commission in Brussels, and other colleagues who were involved in discussion of global internet policy observatory, as on one idea to bring data to internet governance and to make it more informed. Michael, I'm sure that besides your wide experience in internet and economics, you got quite a few interesting concepts from Lichia's presentation. Could you tell us how does it look at the question of evidence and measurement from the, let's say, internet economics perspective and the internet society perspective?
Sure. Absolutely, thank you, and thanks for the invitation. This is definitely a question close to my heart. I joined the Internet Society as the first economist a year ago, and before that, really started thinking about the measurement issues because I was consulting on a project in the Gambia, and I just put in a new undersea cable, $700 million investment. First undersea cable that was reaching the Gambia plus 5 other countries on the west coast of Africa. They changed their total regulatory policy by allowing multiple licenses. It wasn't, the incumbent had a monopoly until then, but they gave 5 ISPs access to capacity and international licenses to be able to use the new cable. So you think this is a great story for development. While I was there, they turned it on for 2 days and turned it off, and someone said, I don't know what happened yesterday, but I could finally Skype my family in Germany using video. Usually it's hard to talk, but suddenly it was great. So I went back home, waited a month or two, and started looking for someone to show, some kind of a study to show this was a great investment because prices went down, services got better, there was more competition, anything, and really there were no measurements. I still haven't seen any study to show systematically what the impact of that was. So you'd think, hopefully whoever did the investment would be looking at that, but there really isn't anything formal. So I've been spending my time at ISOC. One of the things I've been doing is trying to gather what existing data there are, and we're going to try a project next year to start filling the gaps. So I'll just run through a little bit, what I've found in terms of what data, what we do know and what we don't know, and how to interpret that. So there's kind of 3 categories of data that we do know. There's kind of legacy data, not necessarily, from the ITU and from others that have been gathering data on telecommunications. So of course we know this cable is coming into West Africa. They've announced how much it's costing. We know how many people every year use mobile broadband in the Gambia or these other countries through the surveys done by the ITU. We know the regulations that they relaxed the licensing in many of these countries to accommodate the cable. So we know quite a bit just because there's a legacy of data gathering that started in telecommunications and has extended now to the internet, a number of subscribers. There's some data that's just publicly available. You can go to a website and find retail pricing for broadband. You can find through the internet data on IP addresses and a lot of other things. So there's publicly available data, and then there's kind of user-generated data. People can install probes or apps into their phones to be able to measure the performance of the internet. RIPE Atlas has an excellent program. We're for fixed broadband connections around the world. We're working with NetRadar to distribute mobile apps for measuring performance. So you can start to link a few of these things together. Nobody's done it, but you could go to the Gambia and look at how retail pricing has changed. And if someone had stuck a probe in before I checked, but nobody had, we could see the impact. So some of it is just a matter of aggregating data that already exists. But if you think about it, most of the data that exists is on kind of the physical stuff, the devices, the subscriptions, the infrastructure. Once you go online, it becomes there's much less data. For instance, on traffic, where traffic is coming from, where it's going, that's not really measured. Usage, consumer usage, what they're using, and when and where is not really measured unless people take part in a survey or a panel. And the whole of the content and application ecosystem, what people are doing online and where they're going, is not measured. And from an economic point of view, that means that a lot of consumer spending isn't measured. The jobs Online jobs aren't measured, and online revenues are not really measured and broken out. So it's hard to go into a country and say, not even the Gambia, other countries, and say these investments, these policies have worked because your online ecosystem is growing, has this many jobs and this much in revenue. That doesn't really exist. And then it's even trickier because of the international aspect, that you don't know, and when you're using an online service, it doesn't have to be in your country. That means the jobs don't have to be in your country, and the revenues don't have to be in your country. So it's really hard to analyze some of the data, and this leads to a lot of the questions that we're getting that aren't, strictly speaking, in internet governance, but the taxation issues. When a company serves another market and books all the revenues to a third country where there's lower tax rates, and barely has any jobs in the country in the first place, this is obviously leading to a lot of issues in the EU and elsewhere, because it's hard to analyze those revenues and the job impact of the revenues. Right? In the old economy, if you put a car plant into a country, you knew the number of jobs that were being created, the revenues that were created, and you could tax it. But here, when a big data center comes to a country, you don't know if there's going to be a lot of taxation and revenues with that because they may be booked to another country. And even where you do know the revenues, you know, it's hard to interpret. So, you know, if you go look at the car company, for instance, you know pretty much the wages of everyone, you know, the average wages of people working in the car industry. So you have a pretty good sense. And another project, though, that I did before joining ISOC dealt with the app economy, the application economy. And we were trying to, you know, convince governments that it was a good thing to promote this because it's a nice field, it's high tech, it's kind of a cottage industry that you can start as a hobby. And there are some numbers because you can go in and see how many apps are available on the Google Store or the Apple Store. And you know the total revenues. So last year, the total revenues for apps were $26 billion. So that's a nice size. But you can't average those out in any meaningful way. One app called Puzzles and Dragons, which I've never heard of, my kids have never heard of, made $1.5 billion last year, and it had 340 employees. Right, so that's out of the 26 billion, 1.5 went to one company, and the reason they only had 340 employees is because they started and thought they'd have a small app, and it became popular and it became a big app, but they didn't have to hire a lot more people, the way you would if your car becomes, you know, if you're selling a car that takes off or anything in the old economy. So just saying this is a $26 billion industry kind of hides the fact that it's a lottery. You know, 98% of people write an app that nobody buys, and then the 2% have one that just takes off and they make most of the revenues. So, you know, there's a lot of issues that even if you have the numbers, you have to interpret them differently. And I think some of this isn't purely internet governance, but I think you can see spillovers when countries start to address these international taxation issues. You know, that could, the way that it's done could spill over when countries were, you know, upset about losing revenues at the wicket. They kind of wanted to start taxing traffic, internet traffic, as a way of, you know, the sending party pays initiative at the wicket really spilled over, that people were just, you know, losing revenues, thinking that their money was going out of the country, but nobody could actually say how much traffic was going each way or what these taxes would raise because no one had the data. So it was really people putting in policies kind of flying blind to what the impacts would be, and I think that's why we'll be better prepared for those discussions if we have more of the data before they take place.
Great.
So I'll leave it at that and look forward to any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. It's really, well, it's excellent. Great. So many ideas and concepts and questions well, I may monopolize my role as a moderator to ask a few of them, but I guess that somebody from Hungary is following our webinar where there is a big controversy about taxation of the internet traffic. But what you raised, what is extremely relevant, is surprising discrepancy between high rationality of technical tool as the internet is and lack of data that can inform policy. You mentioned a few fields, apps, impact of the cable in Gambia, or taxation. And those are vital issues. And we are basically risking of making important decisions with impact on the whole society and the internet without having any background information. I'm first very, very happy to hear that somebody is doing serious research, as you as ISOC are doing, and that the issue is relevant also for discussion at our conference. Before I pass the floor and open the floor for questions from your side, I would like just to summarize the paper which was written by Ed Gelbstein on security. Security, what we may not, or what we know we don't know. And in this paper, an excellent summary paper, Ed Gelbstein is basically arguing that we know very little about cybercrime and cybersecurity, listing some of the reasons for that, including the fact that many cybercrime attacks are not reported because of the question of reputation in case of the attacks in the banking sector or the private companies. Therefore, there is a serious issue because we don't know what is the scale. In some security companies like McAfee or Kaspersky, they obviously, for their business model, it's good to inflate the problem, but then we are just guessing what we are discussing. Ed Gelbstein is providing quite a few interesting points in arguing, for example, that we have quite imperfect information systems, that the good practices are not reported, and that when you really statistically analyze and trying to find this data, I think it's that companies are investing $25 annually into cybersecurity, and apparently this number is dropped in 2000. No, oh, I'm sorry to say. Here is a recent report by Gartner Group on IT security spending per employee in 2013 indicates that most industries, from insurance and utilities to banking and retail, spend less than the price of a cup of coffee, my espresso, $2.50 per employee per day. And this spending had dropped in 2013. We are discussing increasing relevance of cybersecurity, increasing threats, and reduction in the spending for cybersecurity. And my strong advice is that you consult Ed's paper, which is available on our website. Now, first I would like to ask our before we get the questions to the audience, I would like to ask our panelists, for Lichia, to comment, to make a few comments on the Michael's presentation. What do you see from development perspective as relevant? He mentioned the question of Gambia, cable, and one point that you highlighted, that there is very little knowledge on the specific spot, the geographical spot, country or city, about data in the context of sustainable development. That's what we heard. It can be extended to internet governance, internet zone.
Actually, thank you, Michael, for a very interesting case example and also very concrete. And I think that makes the conversation a little bit easier because, you know, we are dealing with very lofty topic. And I think the first comments I have is that you highlighted the policy linkages, because to invest in the infrastructure at such scale is very important. And so it's not just about sort of whether you have internet capacity, but it's also about finance. And the taxation has direct impact in terms of the investment into future development. And the second thing is also, I was thinking that linkages in terms of the different silos. You know, the conversation also has implication in terms of the WTO trade agreements, right? You know, because, you know, we're talking about providing service into another country. and how do you sort of classifying this? And I think it's very interesting for me. And one thing which I appreciate very much is that you highlighted the lack of data and also lack of mapping. The mapping, it is that we do not have an inventory in terms of relevant topic. Where are the existing databases? And I think this is one of the first priority we need to set up is the inventory. And my question to you is that in terms of you want to know the return on investment for this Gambia question. How can one do return on investment if we do not have a baseline? Right. And so we have actually multiple issues about how do we do retroactively to calculate the return on investment. How do we look at the social spillover effect? Because I think internet is not only for commerce. Internet is also primarily is to to spread the knowledge, to enhance the individual's capability to be engaged. And I think these other things which is soft, it's oftentimes quantitative. And I just wanted to know your thoughts on this, because I think these are the critical questions that we have to deal with in the larger envelope of a sustainable development collaboration globally.
Michael, please.
Yeah, no, I think that's an excellent point. I mean, it's hard enough doing it prospectively, much less to try and go backwards in time. And I think that is the challenge. And then you wonder on what basis people are investing in these kinds of cables. And I think at one level, it's easy to say, well, in a country like the Gambia that either has to go through satellite or very expensive connections through their neighbors, there's really no choice. And then one ISP invests and the others have to be able to keep up. So I think it's really a lot done on faith. And the World Bank, I think to their great credit, is pushing these projects through, and they're pushing them through with open access. I just wonder why, having spent all that money, they're not making sure that it trickles down to the users. And if not, what's the policy block that's blocking it? I think that's really what interests me is, why would you make all these big changes without making sure that they trickle down all the way to the end users ultimately?
Great, thank you. Michael, we have a few questions. You mentioned the World Bank, and recently I heard that World Bank's famous World Development Report for 2016 will focus on internet and development. Okay. That could be an interesting case study on the impact of Gambia.
Yeah,
just
sure.
as an idea for the
Okay.
internet and development report. Now we got a few comments which are along these lines. One comment from indicating we have lots of data on economy infrastructure aspects. Might be indicated. We have some info about incidents, cybercrime, attacks, child abuse, but much less about the social aspects, which Lichia indicated, effect on privacy, education, human rights, freedom, net neutrality, both the challenges, existing policy, and effects of non-existing policy. How do we improve this? Now, on this point, I will just bring one line which was influenced by our physical position at the WMO building. WMO hosts International Panel on Climate Change. Just Michael discussed that. And this is the setup, as you know, where scientists gather and bring the data and evidence about climate change. There are a lot of discussions and disagreements, but in some sort of informal discussions over the coffee with colleagues, I try to see how far one can go, even if there is evidence, let's say disputed or undisputed. Therefore, this is going to be also one step further. Even if we collect the evidence, we are far, far from that point in internet governance comparing climate change. The question is, what will be the impact? But we'll cross that bridge when we approach that. Which a quick comment, please.
A quick comment, and I think this is where data for whom is very important. Of course, data is very important for policy making because it has a global sort of macro impact. However, if we take sustainability to heart, and we take also, in terms of how does the internet change our perception in terms of individuals' capacity to influence. And I think we have to also concurrently go for a bottom-up approach. And that means that internet should enable individuals to sustain their practice, which is contributing to the overall sustainable development goal. So I think data has to come from the bottom in tandem with the data from the top, right? The data, so it's a different level of analysis. And I think what we're missing is that reporting tend to aggregate, and we cannot really get down to the community level to say how can we sort of make different choice so our community can start to become more sustainable and to become more actively engaged in the development process.
Lichia,
the internet is very powerful if we can use it right.
Your argument is basically that it's fine to, let's take the example of Gambia. It's fine to say that if you aggregate that Gambia achieved so much in this particular field of internet access or internet policy. But what is basically your argument, it is important that we have data related to specific even city or local communities. Therefore, aggregation is important to have a broader picture, but what we need to focus more is also customized data to specific context, policy or...
Because the internet divide, which is an old topic, first launched by Al Gore, but I think it still exists. Because you get into, I don't know about Gambia, but there, if I sort of take hypothetically mapping a health situation on it, we do not have a concrete map in terms of where health services is delivered, how health facilities are located, and how the investments are actually made. We need to have the same information about internet in terms of, that's what I mean by coverage and access. City, urban, rural versus, so that, even ghetto. And I think, we will see a lot of the differences. And I think eventually we need to make internet as part of public goods available for people to have access.
Good.
So they're necessary to own.
Just
data has to reflect that.
One point, there was a comment saying that we need to invest more in collaborative research, reporting, and aggregation of research. Definitely, it's music for our, I guess, ears here. The comment, true, this is important, but from Vlada, we'd also need to find good use of collected data and find a way to input the result of analysis into policy-making process. It is also very valid. Those are just lines for our discussion at the conference, how to make a good use of data. In preparation for this event, I got also an interesting question. How would you guarantee privacy since data collection is a controversial issue after the surveillance problem? How you will ensure that this data is used properly? Is open data solution? Therefore, there are many interesting issues which will be open. From the yes, Monsieur is alarmed that that the internet should be described as an engineering artifact. The social part is obviously very important. We agree about. So far, no controversies in questions. Then Dr. Yu mentioned that data should come from the bottom. Can she elaborate on this, please? Thanks.
Yeah, I'll just move out a little bit because I recently was in Ghana, for example, and we are discussing about the immunization of children, and it is very interesting. Ghana has achieved its millennium goal in terms of immunization. However, the critical question is, we do not know where are the 20% who are not immunized because they are street children, they're not registered, they don't have family, they don't have addresses. So, so we are really getting into some countries getting really sort of a nitty-gritty and very wicked challenges. Right? So we need to have data because this is not the data that you could sort of see from the top, the higher level, not the national, So I think the data collection has to become individual effort, and that's why I was very excited about the new innovation. For instance, when Haiti has the crisis and Kenya has the crisis, that you will see that citizen participation in generating citizen data that allow them to sort of to put in collaborative effort with the state to solve a collective issue. And I think we are moving into collaboration, but we also need to learn how to do it, and also giving up at the right place, privacy.
Right.
Michael, one question which I will, please make a comment and then I will.
No, I mean, I'm just thinking that, of course, the internet also gives the tools. I think you mentioned Kenya, and I don't know if you were alluding to Ushahidi, but the phones that we carry, if we have them, can can act both as input devices to let people know where, where there's traffic jams, where in Kenya where there's post-election violence, and they can act as implicit sensors, again with huge privacy issues. But there are, researchers that are showing, you can pick up even flu outbreaks by seeing if in one building or in one area if the phones are moving slower or not leaving the building. Subject to the privacy and having the phones, and ironically, of course, the places that need these services the most don't have the smartphones. But there is a bottom-up possibility with this technology if it's available.
You're doing research on evidence in the economy. Can we answer this, for example, simple question? Does Switzerland, let's say, well-organized country with a good structure, with a high functional government and technological sector, can have an estimate what is the daily or monthly traffic of data between Switzerland and the rest of the world? Or what is the sort of economic taxation aspect that you mentioned, which is opened by activities moving, let's say, outside of Switzerland? Is there any data or any project that is trying to capture that? I'm mentioning Switzerland, but it could be applied for any country in the world.
Yes and no. I mean, clearly, in abstract, the data exists. The backbones and the companies have the data. The only place I know that aggregates that data is telegeography, and they sell it, but they don't necessarily have answer the questions that you're asking or that others are answering. So the answer to that is not really, no. And in Switzerland, of course, it's one set of issues. We're doing projects on where is African content being hosted. In Rwanda, we're doing a project with the ministry, and no one can really tell you, I mean, site by site, but nobody really knows how much traffic is flowing into Rwanda. Even the operators are having trouble giving us the data. And there it has some real practical implications because, most of the data is hosted in Europe. It's very slow to get to Rwanda. It costs a lot of money. So there really isn't, and we are thinking about this and seeing, if there is a solution that if someone like us can go in and aggregate the data and anonymize it so that the backbones and the other companies don't feel like they're giving up commercially sensitive data. But no, right now you couldn't tell this.
This is a good question of anonymizing data, which is extremely important, especially in the field of cyber crime, for example, or privacy protection. That is going probably to be one of the key challenges: how to get the data in order to make informed policy making, but in the same time to protect the integrity, privacy, or corporate reputation. We have a question from Goran, who is referring to interesting project that we at Diplo have been doing. It's a text mining project, which we basically took the 618 transcripts from the all Internet governance forums from 2006 till 2014. For those of you who are new to this field, Internet governance, the Internet governance forum, whatever is said is transcribed by special transcribers. Therefore, Goran led the project which analyzes essentially cognitively evolution of Internet governance since 2006 till 2014, realizing, for example, that spam is not as important today as it was in 2006. It was a big issue, but also framing the discussion, moving from the economic development in 2006 more towards cybersecurity recently. Therefore, this is interesting on very specific field on let's say Internet governance meetings and Internet governance policy, how the discussion is shifting, changing by using available data for text mining. Lichia, you wanted to add something or?
No. That's okay.
Good. Well, we are getting there. Yes, there was a question. I didn't want to miss it. There were, Lichia, for you. You mentioned measuring accountability. What kind of data do we need, can, have, would be useful to measure accountability?
That's a $1 million question, and I have half a minute to answer. But I think, essentially, in principle, the accountability is to be clear in terms of who is responsible for what and what happened, and how has that been sort of being recorded and being reviewed. And I think it is really a full cycle when we talk about accountability. And without data, without very clear specification of objectives, which can be measurable or can be in a qualitative sense, be attributing values, it is really difficult to start to talk about accountability. And that's part of the shortcoming of the effort. And I think one of the great contributions made by setting up Millennium Development Goal, even though it's not as broad as we would like, however, it did introduce management by objectives as a concept, as a practice. And I think we have to continue with this effort at the global level, because I think the goal that's set out by the Secretary General is it's development with dignity is really a very noble objective. And
sure.
I think on that note, we should all make our efforts.
Thank you, Lichia. We have one more comment. Ed Gelbstein asked in his background paper for this discussion whether we can use text mining to learn more about cybersecurity. And Goran from Cybersecurity Cognitive Science Unit of Diplo answered, automated content analysis that result from text mining can be used to measure awareness, a variable of immense importance in any development related to the process, and not only in the sector of cybersecurity. Social scientists are nowadays able to contribute by inspecting whether Internet users are aware of a specific issue and processes that affect the social interactions. Thank you, Goran, for this point. I guess we are facing the huge challenge. We have a tool, we have a data, we have avalanche of data, and I would say we have also a bit cynical public, with a reason, global public audience. They're looking for something which can provide information in contextualized, simple, and effective way. But the challenge is huge. On the first glance, it is simple. Everything is available, more or less. But it is not easy how to aggregate, but how to aggregate in sort of Googlish style. It is simple, that simplify access to this data. And I guess with these comments, we can gradually wrap up our session. I will ask our panelists to make the final comments. Wrap up in the sense that the session should initiate online discussion till our conference in November, and at the conference we'll have a workshop focusing on the evidence-based policy making, also inviting our friends from the International Panel of Climate Change here in the building and other Geneva-based institutions to learn to see what we can learn from other fields, from trade, from climate change, from health, from we heard from you, Lichia, about development assistance. Michael, would you like to make some sort of concluding wrap-up comments?
Sure, thank you. No, I found this discussion excellent, and just want to focus on two things. I mean, first of all, I think this example of mining the text of the IGFs is a fantastic one, because it's a creative idea to say there is stuff, data out there, some of it generated online and some of it that can be analyzed, and so these creative ideas for looking for new sources of data, I think are great, because together that will build up, and every piece the whole be stronger than the pieces. And I think that's the other thing, is this aggregation across, and I think it's great to learn from how the other sectors are doing things, but I think we also should be where it makes sense, gathering the data and across sectors. So take the telecom sector, the trade data, and gather up all of the data so that people can analyze it across the sectors and across the industries and education and health and the others, because all of these things are going online, and it's important to see how they impact each other.
Yeah, but Michael, if I can introduce a new concept, we have a policy silos in policy making, but we have policy silos in data gathering and data management.
Yeah.
That should be one silo that should be somehow crossed, if not completely dismantled.
Right.
Thank you. Lichia.
Yeah, well, I think it's a very interesting conversation, and it's just the beginning. because talking across is not always easy. but I enjoyed it very much. Thank you for the invitation. And my sort of a parting thought at this moment is really about the property right of data. Because Michael, you mentioned that we have to somehow make it neutral enough so we do not leak commercial interests. And I also reflect one of the maps that Jovan, that you have in the conference room, is this internet interaction. And
geography.
Yeah, and then it's you have sort of empty spots. And our concern from development perspective is that we would like to see the empty spots also be mainstreamed, be connected, and they also have the possibility to use internet as a tool for learning, for manage their life, and for also the collective commons. That's our wish. That's why bottom up is so important, and we should not leave these blank spots further behind.
Thank you, Lichia. This is a lovely concluding remark. I would like to invite all of you to join us in online discussion and to join us for the Geneva Internet Conference. We will continue this discussion, as Lichia indicated. It's just the beginning, and we try to outline the main challenges, but even we are not complete with outlining the challenges, let alone finding the solutions for some of these challenges. I would like to thank on your behalf. I can hear the applause, the online applause, to Lichia and Michael for a great contribution and lovely discussion. Thank you and have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.